On this 18th Sunday in Ordinary Time, I just want to talk a little bit about the second reading before going to the Gospel. One of the things that St. Paul talks about is what will separate us from the love of Christ. And he talks about the things of the earth that certainly give us concern, that certainly can be a huge problem in the lives of others and the lives of ourselves: anguish, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, or the sword. And then he talks about those unseen battles in the heavens, with God and his angels and the devil. So life, death, principalities, powers, all those kind of things that are the unseen things that occur in the battle in the sky. So we think about that. And so what does he say? What separates us from the love of Christ? So really, when we think about it, it really is making our own needs, our own desires, those gods, those idols in our life. And there can be many things that we do to make gods, to make idols in our own life. It can be pleasure, it can be security, it can be all those different things that we have that separates us from God's love. Because one of the things about love is not to be forced. So you can't force love. You can't force someone to love you. And so if somebody wants to have their own particular idol of this particular thing, whether it be security, pleasure, all these kind of different things of the earth, then God is not going to somehow, rope them or handcuff them into loving him. And so what separates us really? Our own self. And so because God is always going to be love, God is always going to show that love. In the gospel, what we have the feeding of the 5,000. I always particularly like the feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospel of John. I really don't necessarily like as much the feeding of the 5,000 in the other Gospels, because it really talks about that idea of messianic abundance on the one part. It talks about the fact that there are prophecies that the Messiah would bring in this great abundance. So we have the idea of messianic abundance, that just a little bit of food was transformed into a huge amount of food that was able to feed the people, and not only that, but to have things left over. So we think about messianic abundance. But the other thing we think about is provision, because they say, that send them out into the field, send them out to the countryside, let them fend for themselves. And what does Jesus say? He said, you provide for them. That there is so great a need, and yet you give them some food. And so what it does is that it's like, wait a minute, how are we going to do this? But one of the things about the saints is, when we think about the saints, is that the saints were not necessarily, the people who were had great intelligence. They weren't necessarily the people with great amount of money. They didn't have huge, bank accounts to be able to fund these different things. They weren't people who had an amazing amount of strength and character. But yet, when they found themselves attached to God, they had that supernatural strength. They were able to do much more than what you would think that they would be able to do. And so we see, examples in our own life today. We think about the things that are in great need in our society, and the people who go to say, I'm not going to let, the government fill that need, or I'm not going to let, that's a great idea. They let them do it, but they, in fact, step up and do it themselves. And so really, in a way, being part of this particular gospel themselves. And so whether it be feeding the community like Deacon Brody, whether it be, helping out with worship at Mass, whether it be, helping in teaching a catechism, all the different things, it's stepping up and saying, okay, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that solution. I'm not going to say, go have them go and do it for themselves, but I'm going to be part of that solution. So I think one of the things about this particular gospel is that, again, it talks about the fact of messianic abundance. It talks about the fact that the Messiah, there will be this abundance with the Messiah as proof of his divinity. But there's also the fact of the need to attach ourselves to God. And when we do that, we're able to do much more beyond just our human abilities and our human talents and gifts, but to tap into that supernatural and to bring about a blessing to others. Thanks and God bless.